Hollywood actor called Senator ignorant. Then he pulled out a letter that ended it all. The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the state capitol steps as Marcus Rivera adjusted his designer sunglasses and checked his watch. At 38, the Hollywood A-lister had graced red carpets from Los Angeles to Cannes, but today felt different. Today wasn't about box office numbers or award nominations. Today was about something that mattered far more than his acting career. Marcus had flown in from his Malibu home specifically for this press conference about education funding cuts in Arizona. Born and raised in Phoenix before making it big in Hollywood, he felt a deep responsibility to speak out against what he saw as devastating attacks on public education in his home state. The dry desert heat shimmered off the concrete as reporters gathered around the temporary podium. News crews from CNN, ABC, and local Phoenix stations positioned their equipment strategically. Marcus recognized several political journalists from various charity galas and industry events he'd attended over the years. "Thank you all for being here," Marcus began, his trained voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd. "I'm here today because I can no longer stay silent about the education crisis destroying opportunities for Arizona's children." He pulled out his prepared statement, his hands surprisingly steady despite the weight of the moment. Last week, Senator John Mitchell made comments suggesting that increased education funding would be throwing money at a broken system and that these kids need to learn responsibility, not rely on government handouts. These statements aren't just misguided, they're ignorant. The word hung in the scorching desert air like a challenge. Several reporters immediately began typing frantically on their phones, knowing this soundbite would be trending nationwide within minutes. Marcus continued, his voice growing more passionate as sweat beaded on his forehead. "I attended these underfunded schools. I know what it's like to sit in overcrowded trailers that pass for classrooms, using textbooks held together with duct tape. I know what it's like to watch dedicated teachers spend their own grocery money on basic supplies. For a sitting U.S. senator to dismiss the educational needs of Arizona's children as government dependency is not just wrong. It's ignorant of the harsh realities facing working families in this state." The questions came like rapid-fire bullets in the desert heat. "Mr. Rivera, are you considering a political run? Should Senator Mitchell respond to these accusations? Is this connected to your upcoming film about education?" Marcus handled each question with the poise of someone comfortable with media attention. But his responses carried an urgency and authenticity that his typical entertainment interviews lacked. This wasn't about promoting a blockbuster or discussing his personal life. This was about something that had shaped his very identity. Meanwhile, 3 time zones away in Washington, D.C., Senator John Mitchell sat in his climate-controlled office, watching the press conference live on multiple screens. The 54-year-old former military officer and businessman maintained his composed expression as he listened to the actor's harsh criticisms, his weathered hands folded calmly on his mahogany desk. "Sir, how should we respond?" asked his chief of staff, Patricia Wells, a sharp-minded woman in her 40s who had been fielding calls from reporters and political commentators for the past 2 hours. Mitchell leaned back in his leather chair, his steel-gray eyes never leaving the screen. "Schedule a meeting. I want to speak with Mr. Rivera face-to-face." "Sir, are you certain that's advisable? The media will turn this into a circus and, Patricia, I've dealt with passionate individuals my entire career, both in the military and in business. Sometimes the most effective approach is direct engagement." His voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had led troops in combat and boardrooms alike. "Besides, I believe Mr. Rivera might find our conversation quite enlightening." 4 hours later, Marcus was unwinding in his suite at the Four Seasons Scottsdale when his phone buzzed with a Washington, D.C. area code he didn't recognize. "Marcus Rivera speaking." "Mr. Rivera, this is Senator John Mitchell's office." The senator would like to arrange a meeting with you to discuss your concerns regarding education funding. Would tomorrow afternoon work with your schedule?" Marcus paused, genuinely surprised by the directness of the request. He had expected either deafening silence or a carefully crafted political statement released through official channels. A personal meeting was completely unexpected. Yes, I can make that work. Where would you prefer to meet?" "The senator will fly to Phoenix tomorrow morning. Would 2 p.m. at his Arizona state office be acceptable?" After confirming the details, Marcus ended the call and walked out onto his suite's private balcony, gazing out at the sprawling Phoenix metropolitan area, stretching endlessly toward the purple mountains in the distance. The city lights were beginning to twinkle as the famous Arizona sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and deep purples. His phone buzzed with a text from his publicist back in Los Angeles. "Saw the press conference. Trending #2 nationally. Excellent work, but tread carefully. Politics is completely different from Hollywood." Marcus smiled grimly as he watched a commercial airliner descend towards Sky Harbor Airport. He was about to discover just how different politics could be. The next morning brought another blazing Arizona day, with temperatures already climbing toward triple digits by 9 a.m. Marcus had spent a restless night researching Senator Mitchell's background, voting record, and public statements about education. What he found was a complex picture that didn't fit neatly into his preconceived notions. Mitchell had served 2 tours in Afghanistan as an army officer before building a successful construction company that employed hundreds of people across Arizona. His voting record on education was mixed. He had opposed some funding increases, but had also supported teacher training programs and infrastructure improvements. As Marcus's Uber pulled up to the modern office building housing Senator Mitchell's Arizona headquarters, he felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. The building's glass facade reflected the harsh desert sun, creating an almost mirror-like surface that seemed to symbolize the unclear nature of what lay ahead. Senator John Mitchell's Phoenix office occupied the entire 15th floor of a gleaming downtown high-rise, offering panoramic views of the Valley of the Sun, stretching out in all directions. The space was professionally designed to impress. Rich leather furnishings, Arizona-themed artwork, and floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the dramatic desert landscape surrounding the sprawling metropolitan area. Marcus arrived precisely on time, as was his professional habit for important meetings. He had chosen his outfit carefully, dark jeans and a crisp white button-down shirt that looked respectful but not overly formal, wanting to signal both seriousness and accessibility. The receptionist, a friendly woman in her 60s with silver hair and a warm southwestern accent, offered him iced tea while he waited. "The senator is just finishing a conference call with the Veterans Affairs Committee," she explained. "He'll be right with you, Mr. Rivera." Marcus accepted the drink gratefully, using the time to study the photographs and awards covering the office walls. He saw images of Mitchell with various presidents, governors, and military leaders, but what caught his attention were the more personal photos. Mitchell with young soldiers, at high school graduations, and visiting construction sites where his company was building schools and community centers. Quite a journey, isn't it? Marcus turned to see Senator Mitchell himself, standing in the doorway of his private office. In person, the senator was shorter than Marcus had expected, but commanded immediate attention. His silver hair was neatly styled, and he wore a conservative navy suit with an Arizona flag pin on his lapel. "Senator Mitchell," Marcus said, rising and extending his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me on such short notice." The handshake was firm and brief, neither man attempting to establish dominance, but both clearly assessing the other's character in that moment of contact. "Please, call me John," the senator said, "and thank you for making the trip. I know you could have easily made your statement yesterday and returned to California, but you didn't. That tells me something important about your commitment to this issue." As they settled into comfortable chairs arranged around a small conference table rather than across Mitchell's imposing desk. It was a deliberate choice, Marcus realized, designed to create a more collaborative atmosphere rather than an adversarial one. "I'll be direct with you, Marcus," Mitchell began, his voice carrying the measured authority of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. "Your press conference yesterday characterized me as someone who doesn't understand or care about education. That assessment was both painful and inaccurate." Marcus leaned forward slightly, maintaining eye contact. "Senator, with respect, your own recorded statement suggested that education funding increases would be wasteful spending. How else should people interpret those comments?" "Context matters tremendously," Mitchell replied calmly, reaching for a thick folder on the side table. That quote was extracted from a 45-minute discussion about education reform, where I was specifically addressing the need for accountability in education spending. I wasn't arguing against investment in education. I was arguing for strategic investment that actually improves outcomes for students. He opened the folder, revealing what appeared to be months of detailed research and documentation. "Before we continue this conversation, I want you to see something that I've been working on privately." The folder contained hundreds of pages of meticulously organized research, school district budgets, student performance data, teacher retention statistics, and infrastructure assessments. Marcus could see handwritten notes in the margins, highlighting specific problems and potential solutions. "This represents 18 months of personal research into Arizona's education system," Mitchell explained. "Every school district, every budget allocation, every standardized test result, every teacher shortage report. I visited 87 schools across this state, not for photo opportunities or campaign events, but to understand the real challenges facing our educational system." Marcus examined the documents more closely, finding detailed observations about specific schools Mitchell had visited. There were notes about overcrowded classrooms, outdated technology, dedicated teachers struggling with inadequate resources, and students achieving remarkable things despite systemic obstacles. "You've visited all these schools personally?" Marcus asked, looking up from the comprehensive documentation. 87 schools in the past year and a half," Mitchell confirmed. "No media, no staff photographers, no political theater. I went during regular school days, observed classes, ate lunch with students, and had honest conversations with teachers and administrators about their biggest challenges and needs." Eyes. Marcus continued reading, finding detailed notes about a school in rural Arizona where students were sharing decade-old textbooks, another where the air conditioning hadn't worked properly in 3 years, and a third where a passionate teacher was spending her own limited income on basic classroom supplies. "Desert View Elementary in Tucson," Marcus read aloud. "Ms. Sarah Chen, 4th grade teacher, 31 students, uses personal funds for art supplies and books. Incredibly dedicated, but visibly exhausted by system limitations. I spent an entire morning in her classroom," Mitchell said quietly. "Those children absolutely loved her, but you could see the stress and frustration in her eyes. She was giving everything she had, but the system was failing to give her the tools she needed to succeed." The air-conditioned office fell silent as Marcus absorbed the implications of what he was seeing. This wasn't the work of someone ignorant about education. This was the systematic research of someone who understood the problems intimately and personally. "Why didn't you share this information publicly when you made those comments about funding?" Marcus asked, genuinely puzzled. Mitchell sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "Because in our current political climate, nuance often gets lost in translation. I was trying to make a point about accountability and effectiveness, but the message got distorted in the media cycle." The truth is, I've been quietly developing comprehensive education reform legislation that would significantly increase funding while implementing strong oversight mechanisms to ensure the money actually reaches classrooms and students. He reached for another folder, even thicker than the first. This is the Arizona Educational Excellence and Accountability Act that I've been crafting. It includes a 50% increase in education funding over 3 years, coupled with transparency requirements, teacher retention incentives, and direct classroom impact measurements. Marcus opened the second folder, finding carefully drafted legislation that addressed virtually every concern he had raised in his press conference. The bill included provisions for teacher salary increases, infrastructure modernization, updated educational technology, smaller class sizes, and comprehensive support for students from low-income families. "This is incredibly thorough," Marcus said, genuinely impressed by the scope and detail of the proposed legislation. "When were you planning to introduce this?" "Next month," Mitchell replied. "I wanted to ensure every detail was carefully considered before making it public. But your press conference yesterday made me realize I may have waited too long to communicate my intentions and commitment." Marcus looked up from the documents, seeing the senator in a completely different light. "John, I owe you a sincere apology. I made assumptions based on incomplete information and media soundbites." "No, you don't owe me anything," Mitchell said firmly. "You were advocating passionately for something you believe in deeply, something that directly affects communities and children you care about. I respect that commitment. What I'm hoping is that we can find a way to work together moving forward." "What did you have in mind?" Mitchell leaned forward, his eyes intense with purpose. "I want you to help me introduce and promote this legislation. Your voice reaches people who might never listen to a politician, especially young people and parents. Together, we might actually be able to build the coalition necessary to pass meaningful education reform." Marcus felt the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. This wasn't what he had expected when he flew to Phoenix, but it was exactly the kind of opportunity he had hoped for, a real chance to make a lasting difference. "What would that collaboration look like practically?" he asked. "Joint public appearances, school visits together, testimony before legislative committees, community forums. We show people that this isn't about partisan politics. It's about ensuring every child has access to quality education regardless of their zip code or family income." The two men sat in contemplative silence for a moment, each considering the potential path forward. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Phoenix continued its daily rhythm under the relentless desert sun, unaware that a Hollywood actor and a U.S. senator were potentially forging an unlikely partnership. "There's one more thing," Mitchell said, reaching into his desk drawer. "This arrived by express mail this morning, addressed to both of us." He handed Marcus an envelope with careful handwriting. The return address showed Desert View Elementary School in Tucson, the same school they had just been discussing in Mitchell's research notes. Marcus opened the envelope carefully and found a handwritten letter on official school letterhead that would change everything. Marcus unfolded the letter with careful attention, noting the precise handwriting and the official Desert View Elementary School letterhead. As he began reading, his expression shifted from curiosity to deep, visible emotion. "Dear Mr. Rivera and Senator Mitchell," the letter began in neat, flowing cursive. "My name is Sarah Chen, and I teach 4th grade at Desert View Elementary School in Tucson, Arizona. I watched Mr. Rivera's press conference yesterday, and I felt compelled to write to both of you about what's really happening in our classrooms." Marcus glanced up at Mitchell, who was watching him intently with a knowing expression. "How did she know to address this to both of us?" "She didn't originally," Mitchell replied quietly. "She sent it to my office with a note asking me to forward it to you. When I saw what she had written, I knew we needed to read it together." Marcus continued reading, his voice growing softer as he read portions aloud. I have been teaching for 12 years, and I have never written a letter like this before. But Mr. Rivera's words yesterday gave me hope that someone outside our struggling school district might finally understand what we face every single day. Yesterday morning, before I saw the press conference, I was in my classroom preparing for another challenging day. We are reading Where the Red Fern Grows with my students, but we only have 15 copies of the book for 31 children. So we read it together as a class, taking turns, and I watch their faces light up when it's their turn to hold the precious book. Little Miguel Gonzalez sits in the second row. His father works construction, and his mother cleans offices at night. Miguel arrives at school early every morning, not because he has to, but because he genuinely loves learning. He asks questions about everything. How do computers work? Why do different countries speak different languages? What makes airplanes fly? His curiosity seems limitless, but our resources certainly are not. Last week, Miguel asked if he could borrow a book to read to his baby brother at home. I wanted to say yes so badly, but we cannot allow books to leave the classroom because we don't have replacement copies if they get lost or damaged. I saw the disappointment cloud his bright eyes, and it absolutely broke my heart. When you spoke yesterday, Mr. Rivera, about overcrowded classrooms and outdated materials, I felt like someone finally understood our daily reality. But then you said something that brought tears to my eyes. You said, these children deserve better. Not that they should be grateful for what little they have, or that they need to work harder, but that they deserve better. That single word, deserve, changed my entire perspective. Marcus paused in his reading, his throat tight with emotion. He looked around the impressive office with its panoramic city views, then back to the simple school letterhead in his hands. There's more, Mitchell said gently, encouraging him to continue. Marcus cleared his throat and kept reading. I want you to know about my other students too. Isabella Rodriguez dreams of becoming a veterinarian, but our science equipment dates back to the 1990s. She studies animal biology from textbooks with faded photographs and tries to imagine what modern veterinary equipment looks like. Kevin Johnson writes incredible stories, but has to share colored pencils with 6 other students when we do creative writing projects. Amanda Thompson loves mathematics and solves complex problems in her head, but works from workbooks that previous students have already used, so she has to erase their answers first. These children aren't statistics in a budget report or talking points in a political debate. They are Miguel, Isabella, Kevin, and Amanda. They are 31 bright, curious, deserving children who come to my classroom every day eager to learn, despite every systemic obstacle working against them. I don't understand much about politics, Mr. Rivera, but I understand children. And I know that when someone with your platform speaks up for them, people listen in ways they don't when it's just another teacher voicing concerns about resources. Senator Mitchell visited our school 4 months ago. He didn't bring cameras or reporters or staff members. He simply came during a regular school day, sat with my students during reading time, ate lunch in our cramped cafeteria, and asked thoughtful, detailed questions about our greatest needs. He took extensive notes in a small notebook and promised to remember what he observed. I believed him then, and I believe him now. I'm writing to both of you because I think you have far more in common than either of you might realize. You both genuinely care about children. You both understand that education is about much more than funding formulas and test scores. And you both have the power and platform to make a real, lasting difference. I've included something special with this letter. It's a story that Miguel Gonzalez wrote last week about his dreams for the future. His spelling isn't perfect yet, and his handwriting is still developing, but his dreams are as big and beautiful as any child's should be. Please don't let our children become just another political controversy or media cycle. They deserve so much better than that. With hope, gratitude, and determination, Sarah Chen, 4th grade teacher, Desert View Elementary School. Marcus set the letter down with trembling hands and picked up the small piece of notebook paper that had been included. In careful, childish handwriting, Miguel Gonzalez had written, "When I grow up, I want to be a teacher like Miss Chen, or maybe an astronaut who explores space. I want to learn everything there is to know about the universe and then teach other kids so they can learn too. I want to make sure no kid ever has to wait for their turn to read a book, because there will be enough books for everyone in every classroom. My dad says dreams are free, but making them come true takes hard work and money. I don't have money, but I have really big dreams and I work super hard every day." Ms. Chen says that's the most important start anyone can have. The office fell into complete, profound silence. Marcus stared at the child's innocent words, feeling the enormous weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. "My God," he whispered, and it sounded like a prayer. Mitchell leaned across the table and placed a gentle, supportive hand on Marcus's shoulder. "That's exactly why I do this job, son. It's not about the political power or media attention. It's about kids like Miguel, who still believe that working hard and dreaming big will be enough to change their lives." Marcus looked up, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "We have to do something immediate and meaningful. We can't just introduce legislation or hold press conferences while these kids wait for the political process to slowly work itself out." "What are you thinking?" Marcus stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the sprawling Phoenix metropolitan area. The desert mountains stood majestically in the distance, silent witnesses to countless dreams and struggles playing out in the valley below. "I'm thinking we need to show people exactly what Sarah Chen showed us in this letter. Real children with real dreams facing real, unnecessary obstacles." He turned back to Mitchell with renewed determination. "I want to visit Desert View Elementary. I want to meet Miguel and Isabella and Kevin and Amanda, and I want to bring cameras to document what we see." Mitchell raised an eyebrow. "Are you certain about that? Once we start down this path publicly, there's no going back. The media attention will be intense and sustained, and every word we say will be analyzed and scrutinized." "Good," Marcus said firmly. "Let them scrutinize every word. Let them see what we saw in that letter. Let them try to explain why children like Miguel should have to wait their turn for books, or why Isabella should study science from textbooks older than she is." He picked up the letter again, rereading Miguel's hopeful words. "You know what affected me most about this letter? It wasn't the lack of resources or even the daily struggles these children face. It was Sarah Chen's persistent hope. After 12 years of fighting for her students with inadequate support, she still believes that speaking up will make a difference." Mitchell nodded slowly, his respect for both the teacher and the actor growing. "Sarah Chen represents the very best of what teaching can be. She's exactly the kind of educator we should be supporting with every resource available." "Then let's support her," Marcus said decisively. "Let's support all of them. But let's do it authentically and meaningfully. No political theater, no manufactured photo opportunities, real engagement, real solutions, real results that make a difference in children's lives." The two men looked at each other across the conference table, the letter lying between them like a bridge connecting their different worlds and perspectives. Outside, Phoenix continued its daily rhythm under the blazing Arizona sun, unaware that a Hollywood actor and a U.S. senator were planning to fundamentally change the conversation about education in America. "When do we start?" Mitchell asked. "Tomorrow," Marcus replied without hesitation. "Sarah Chen and Miguel have waited long enough for adults to start working together on their behalf. As if summoned by their renewed sense of purpose, Mitchell's Chief of Staff, Patricia Wells, appeared in the doorway. "Senator, I apologize for interrupting, but the phones have been ringing constantly. Word has somehow leaked about your meeting with Mr. Rivera, and every major news outlet is requesting a statement." Marcus and Mitchell exchanged meaningful glances, then smiled simultaneously with shared understanding. "Schedule a press conference for tomorrow afternoon," Mitchell said decisively, "at Desert View Elementary School in Tucson." "Sir, are you absolutely sure that's—" "Patricia," Marcus interrupted gently but firmly, "sometimes the most appropriate place to discuss education policy is in an actual school, surrounded by the students and teachers who are directly affected by our decisions. The gymnasium at Desert View Elementary School had never hosted anything remotely like this media spectacle. By 1 p.m. the following day, national news crews had transformed the modest space into a bustling media center. Satellite trucks from CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and every major network lined the street outside the small Tucson school, their equipment reaching toward the brilliant Arizona sky like technological monuments. Inside the school, the atmosphere crackled with nervous energy and anticipation. Principal Maria Santos, a dedicated educator in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, moved through the hallways, ensuring everything was prepared for this unprecedented level of attention. She had worked in Arizona public schools for 28 years and had never imagined anything like this happening at her small, underfunded school. "Sarah, are you ready for this?" she asked, stopping by the 4th grade classroom where Sarah Chen was making final preparations. Sarah smoothed her best dress and checked her reflection in the hallway mirror one more time. At 34, she had dedicated her entire adult life to teaching, and today felt like the culmination of every struggle, every small victory, every moment of frustration and hope she had experienced in her career. "As ready as I'll ever be, Maria," she replied. "I just hope I can speak clearly when all those cameras are focused on me." "You'll do beautifully, honey. Just speak from your heart like you always do with your students." Down the hall, Miguel Gonzalez sat at his desk, carefully practicing the short speech he had prepared with his teacher's help. His parents had helped him with some of the bigger words, but the thoughts and dreams were entirely his own. At 9 years old, he couldn't fully comprehend the magnitude of what was happening, but he understood that important people were coming to listen to him talk about school and learning and his dreams for the future. "Remember, mijo," his mother, Rosa Gonzalez, said as she knelt beside his desk, adjusting his best shirt. "Just talk to them like you talk to me and Papa. Tell them about your dreams and about how much you love Ms. Chen and learning." Marcus arrived at the school at 1:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the scheduled press conference. He had deliberately chosen to wear casual clothes, khakis, and a polo shirt, rather than a suit, wanting to appear approachable and genuine rather than polished and political. As his car pulled up to the modest school building, he was struck by how different this felt from his usual red carpet appearances and Hollywood events. Senator Mitchell arrived moments later in an unmarked vehicle, also dressed casually in slacks and a button-down shirt. The two men met at the school's main entrance, shaking hands like old friends rather than recent acquaintances who had been political adversaries just days before. "How are you feeling about this?" Mitchell asked as they walked toward the building under the intense Arizona sun. "Nervous," Marcus admitted honestly. "This isn't a movie set where we can do multiple takes if something goes wrong. These are real people's lives and futures we're discussing." "That's exactly what makes it so important," Mitchell replied with conviction. They were warmly greeted by Principal Santos, who personally escorted them through the school. Marcus immediately noticed the condition of the building: faded paint in the hallways, outdated bulletin boards, and classrooms that were clearly overcrowded and under-resourced. But he also noticed something equally important: the warmth and genuine dedication of the staff, the enthusiasm and curiosity of the students, and the strong sense of community that permeated every corner of the building despite the physical limitations. "Senator Mitchell!" a familiar voice called out excitedly. They turned to see Miguel Gonzalez running down the hallway, his face absolutely beaming with recognition and excitement. "You came back just like you promised." Mitchell immediately knelt down to the boy's eye level, his serious political demeanor melting away completely. "I told you I would, didn't I, Miguel? I want you to meet someone very special. This is Mr. Marcus Rivera." Miguel looked up at the famous actor with wide, curious eyes. "Are you really from Hollywood? Like, where they make movies?" Marcus knelt down beside Mitchell, feeling the innocence and hope radiating from the child. "I am, Miguel, but more importantly, I grew up here in Arizona and went to schools just like this one when I was your age." "Really? Did you have to share books too?" The simple, direct question hit Marcus with unexpected emotional force. "Yes, Miguel, I did. But you know what? I had teachers just like Ms. Chen who helped me believe that I could achieve any dream I was willing to work for." They were led to Sarah Chen's classroom, where the teacher was waiting with visible nervousness. When she saw Senator Mitchell, her face lit up with recognition and gratitude, but when she saw Marcus, she became visibly emotional. "Mr. Rivera, I can't believe you're actually here," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you so much for reading my letter and for caring enough to come." "Thank you for writing it and for trusting us with your story," Marcus replied sincerely. "Your letter changed everything for both of us." Geez. The press conference was scheduled to begin at 2 p.m., but first, Marcus and Mitchell wanted to spend meaningful time in the actual classroom environment. They sat with the students, listened to them read aloud, and observed firsthand the daily challenges that Sarah Chen had described so eloquently in her letter. Marcus watched as 4 students shared a single copy of a mathematics textbook, patiently taking turns to work through problems. He saw Isabella Rodriguez carefully studying a faded diagram of the solar system in a science book that was clearly decades old. He observed Kevin Johnson writing an imaginative story with a pencil that had been sharpened down to almost nothing because the classroom had run out of new supplies weeks ago. But beyond the material shortages, he witnessed something truly magical. The incredible learning that happened when dedicated, passionate teachers worked with eager, curious students. He saw Sarah Chen patiently helping a struggling reader, celebrating a student's correct answer as if it were a major achievement, and seamlessly managing 31 different personalities and learning styles with remarkable grace, skill, and genuine love. "This is what people across the country need to see," Marcus whispered to Mitchell as they watched Sarah Chen help Amanda Thompson work through a challenging math problem. At exactly 2 p.m., they moved to the cramped gymnasium where nearly 100 reporters and camera operators waited in the stifling heat. The room buzzed with anticipation as cameras focused on the simple podium that had been set up on the scuffed basketball court. Principal Santos stepped to the microphone first. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Desert View Elementary School. We are deeply honored to host this important conversation about education in Arizona and across our nation. I'd like to introduce Senator John Mitchell and actor Marcus Rivera." As the 2 men approached the podium together, camera flashes created a strobe effect in the dim gymnasium. But instead of the combative atmosphere that many reporters had expected, there was something markedly different in the air, a genuine sense of collaboration and shared purpose that was almost palpable. Senator Mitchell spoke first, his voice carrying clearly through the packed gymnasium. 3 days ago, I was publicly characterized as ignorant about education issues. That criticism was painful, not because it was politically damaging, but because I have spent the last 18 months studying education in Arizona more intensively than I ever studied anything as a football coach in college." He paused, allowing the significance of his words to settle over the assembled crowd. "But I realized something crucial. It doesn't matter how much research I've conducted or how many schools I've visited if I'm not effectively communicating that work and commitment to the people I serve." Marcus Rivera was absolutely right to challenge me publicly, and I'm genuinely grateful that he did. Marcus stepped to the microphone, his professional training helping him project his voice clearly throughout the sweltering gymnasium. "When I spoke 3 days ago, I believed I was confronting an opponent of public education. What I discovered instead was a dedicated partner who had been working toward the same goals through different methods and approaches." He reached into his shirt pocket and carefully pulled out Sarah Chen's handwritten letter. "I want to share with you a letter that fundamentally changed my perspective and brought Senator Mitchell and me together in this crucial work." He began reading Sarah Chen's letter aloud, his trained voice carrying every nuance of emotion and meaning. The room fell into complete, profound silence as he read about Miguel Gonzalez's boundless curiosity, Isabella Rodriguez's dreams of becoming a veterinarian, and the daily challenges faced by students and teachers at Desert View Elementary. When he finished reading Miguel's essay about wanting to become a teacher or astronaut, there wasn't a single dry eye in the stifling gymnasium. Veteran political reporters who had covered countless press conferences and political events found themselves genuinely moved by the simple, hopeful words of a 9-year-old boy. "This letter reminded me why I became involved in this issue in the first place," Marcus continued, his voice thick with emotion. "It's not about political parties or ideological differences or media coverage. It's about children who deserve the same educational opportunities that Senator Mitchell and I had when we were their age." Mitchell stepped back to the microphone, his usual political composure replaced by genuine passion. "Which is why I'm announcing today the introduction of the Arizona Educational Excellence and Accountability Act, comprehensive legislation that will increase education funding by 50% over 3 years while ensuring complete accountability and transparency in how those precious dollars are spent." The room erupted with shouted questions from reporters, but Marcus raised his hand for silence. "Before we take any questions, we want you to hear directly from the people this legislation will actually impact in real, tangible ways. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Sarah Chen and one of her remarkable students, Miguel Gonzalez." 8 months later, Marcus Rivera sat in the gallery of the Arizona State Senate chamber, watching intently as the final votes were tallied for the Arizona Educational Excellence and Accountability Act. The chamber was packed beyond capacity with teachers, parents, students, and community members from across the state, all holding their collective breath as the electronic voting board displayed the results in glowing green and red lights. "The motion passes 22-8, announced the Senate President. "The Arizona Educational Excellence and Accountability Act is hereby approved and will be sent to Governor Hobbs for signature." The chamber exploded in thunderous cheers and sustained applause. Marcus felt tears of joy and relief streaming down his face as he watched Senator Mitchell embrace fellow legislators who had supported the groundbreaking bill. It had been a long, challenging journey, filled with political obstacles and setbacks, but they had somehow managed to achieve the impossible. The path from that first emotionally charged press conference at Desert View Elementary to this triumphant moment had transformed not just Arizona's approach to education funding, but had also fundamentally changed both Marcus Rivera and John Mitchell as individuals and public figures. After the press conference 8 months ago, the story had exploded across social media and news outlets nationwide. The powerful image of a Hollywood actor and a Republican senator sitting side by side with fourth graders reading together from worn, shared textbooks, had captured the public imagination in ways that traditional political theatre never could. But the real sustained work had begun long after the cameras stopped rolling and the reporters went home. Marcus had made the unprecedented decision to temporarily relocate to Arizona, spending months visiting schools across the state, not as a celebrity making token appearances, but as a genuine advocate, learning about the complex challenges facing students, teachers, and administrators. He had maintained regular contact with Miguel Gonzalez and the other students at Desert View Elementary, following their academic progress and celebrating their achievements both big and small. Miguel had become something of a local celebrity himself, speaking at education events across Arizona while maintaining his infectious enthusiasm for learning and his dreams of becoming either a teacher or an astronaut, or perhaps both. Sarah Chen had emerged as the unofficial spokesperson for the campaign supporting the education bill, testifying before legislative committees and speaking at community forums across Arizona. Her quiet dignity, obvious expertise, and unwavering dedication to her students had won over even the most skeptical lawmakers and taxpayers. The unlikely partnership between Marcus and Mitchell had surprised political observers and pundits nationwide. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, political perspectives, and life experiences, they had discovered common ground in their genuine commitment to children and education that transcended partisan politics. You know, Mitchell had observed during one of their many school visits, in the military, the most effective units weren't necessarily the ones with the most resources or the flashiest equipment. They were the ones where everyone understood they were fighting for the same mission. The Arizona Educational Excellence and Accountability Act was comprehensive legislation that addressed not just funding levels, but also teacher retention, infrastructure modernization, and educational innovation. It included detailed provisions for updated textbooks and technology, smaller class sizes, significant increases in teacher salaries, and robust support programs for students from low-income families. Perhaps most importantly, it included the accountability measures that Mitchell had insisted upon, transparent tracking systems that ensured taxpayer money would reach classrooms and students rather than being lost in administrative bureaucracy. As the senators filed out of the chamber following the historic vote, Marcus made his way down to the floor where Mitchell was shaking hands and accepting congratulations from colleagues and supporters. "We actually did it, John," Marcus said, embracing the senator warmly. "No, my friend," Mitchell replied, his voice thick with emotion. "We all did it together." Sarah Chen, Miguel, all those teachers and students who shared their stories, all the parents who contacted their representatives, they made this happen. We just helped amplify their voices. Later that evening, there was a celebration at Desert View Elementary School. The same gymnasium that had hosted their joint press conference 8 months earlier was now decorated with colorful banners and balloons celebrating the passage of the education bill. Sarah Chen stood at the microphone, addressing the crowd of teachers, parents, students, and community members who had gathered to celebrate this historic achievement. 8 months ago, I wrote a letter that I never imagined anyone would read outside of our small school community. I certainly never dreamed it would lead to this incredible moment. She paused, looking out at the enthusiastic crowd. But the most important thing about tonight isn't the new funding or the updated textbooks that are coming. It's the reminder that when we speak up for our children with honesty and love, when we share their stories and dreams, people will listen and respond. Miguel Gonzalez, now 10 years old and even more confident and articulate, took the microphone next. "I want to thank Mr. Marcus and Senator John for listening to our stories and for working so hard to help kids like me. My mom says that when adults really listen to children and work together, amazing things can happen." He looked directly at Marcus and Mitchell, who were sitting in the front row with tears in their eyes. I still want to be a teacher or an astronaut when I grow up. But now I also want to be like both of you, someone who helps other people achieve their dreams and makes sure kids have everything they need to learn and grow." The sustained applause was deafening, but Marcus barely heard it. He was thinking about the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment, from a confrontational press conference where he had publicly attacked Mitchell's character to this celebration of their shared achievement. After the formal program ended, Marcus found himself back in Sarah Chen's classroom, which now featured new desks, updated technology, and a classroom library with enough books for every student to have their own copy of every title. "It looks completely different," he said, running his hand along the spines of the brand new books. "It feels different too," Sarah replied. "The children are more excited about learning when they have the proper tools and resources. But you know what hasn't changed? Their dreams and curiosity. Those were always as big and beautiful as they are now." She pulled out a folder from her desk. "I've been collecting thank you letters from teachers across Arizona who heard about the new funding. Would you like to see some of them?" Marcus smiled, remembering the letter that had started this entire journey. "Actually, I think I'd rather go visit those teachers in person. John and I have been discussing a statewide tour to ensure the implementation goes smoothly and that the promises we made actually get fulfilled." "You're really going to stay involved long term?" "Sarah, 8 months ago I thought I was just making a political statement. What I discovered was a life-changing calling. These kids, these teachers, this work, it's transformed who I am as a person." Outside in the hallway, Senator Mitchell was talking with Principal Santos about the school's plans for the new funding. "Our first priority is reducing class sizes," she was explaining. "Then we'll focus on updating our science lab and expanding our library and computer facilities." "What about teacher retention?" Mitchell asked. "Are you able to keep excellent teachers like Sarah Chen?" "With the salary increases included in the bill, absolutely. In fact, we've had 5 outstanding teachers apply for positions here just this week. Word is spreading that Arizona is finally serious about supporting education." As the evening wound down, Marcus and Mitchell found themselves sitting on the school steps, looking out at the parking lot where families were loading children into cars and saying their goodbyes under the brilliant Arizona stars. "You know," Marcus said thoughtfully, "when this all started, I thought you were the problem. Politicians who didn't understand what was happening in schools. And I thought you were just another Hollywood celebrity who didn't understand the complexities of governance and policy making." Mitchell replied with a chuckle. "It turns out we were both wrong about each other and both right about what mattered most." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of children's laughter and parents' conversations echoing across the desert evening air. "What's next for us?" Marcus asked. "Well, the real work is just beginning," Mitchell said. "We need to ensure this money gets to where it's supposed to go, that teachers like Sarah get the support they need, and that kids like Miguel get the education they deserve. And we need to help other states learn from what we've accomplished here." Marcus nodded. "I've been thinking about that too. What if we created a foundation, something that could provide ongoing support and oversight, ensuring the promises we made tonight actually get kept for years to come?" "I love that idea. What would you call it?" Marcus smiled, thinking of the letter that had changed everything and the little boy whose dreams had inspired them all. "The Miguel Gonzalez Foundation for Educational Excellence." Named after a young man who dreams of becoming a teacher or an astronaut and who reminded us that children's dreams should never be limited by the resources available to them. 1 year later, the Miguel Gonzalez Foundation had become a reality, with Marcus as its executive director and Mitchell serving on its board of directors. The foundation worked alongside the state implementation of the Educational Excellence Act, providing additional resources, monitoring progress, and continuing to tell the stories of students and teachers across Arizona and beyond. Miguel Gonzalez himself had become the Foundation's youngest ambassador, speaking at events across the country and inspiring other children to pursue their dreams while advocating for educational equity. His reading skills had improved dramatically with access to his own books, and his passion for science had flourished with updated equipment and materials. Sarah Chen had been promoted to curriculum coordinator for her district, helping other teachers implement new resources and training programs funded by the Act. She continued teaching her fourth grade class, but now she also mentored new teachers and helped develop innovative teaching methods that were being studied by education researchers nationwide. The success in Arizona had attracted national attention, with other states beginning to study the model of bipartisan cooperation that had made the Educational Excellence Act possible. Marcus found himself testifying before Congress about the importance of education funding, while Mitchell had become a leading voice for education reform within the Republican Party. But perhaps the most meaningful change was personal. Both men had discovered that their initial confrontation had led to something neither had expected, a genuine friendship built on mutual respect, shared values, and a common commitment to serving others. 2 years after that first heated press conference, Marcus stood once again at a podium, this time at the National Education Association's annual conference in Chicago, accepting an award for public service. But instead of delivering a typical acceptance speech, he did something that surprised everyone in attendance. "This award doesn't belong to me," he said, looking out at the audience of thousands of educators from across the country. "It belongs to a fourth-grade teacher in Arizona named Sarah Chen, who wrote a letter that changed my life. It belongs to a little boy named Miguel Gonzalez, who dreams of becoming a teacher so he can help other children learn and grow. And it belongs to a senator named John Mitchell, who taught me that sometimes the people we think are our opponents are actually our partners waiting to be discovered." He paused, his voice growing stronger with conviction. 2 years ago, I called Senator Mitchell ignorant about education. I was wrong. He wasn't ignorant. He was working quietly and methodically while I was working loudly and publicly. When we finally started working together instead of against each other, we accomplished something extraordinary. The audience erupted in sustained applause, but Marcus wasn't finished. "This award represents something crucial about our democracy and our society. It demonstrates that when we stop making assumptions about each other's motives and start listening to the voices that matter most, the voices of children like Miguel Gonzalez and teachers like Sarah Chen, we can achieve remarkable things together." In the audience, Senator Mitchell smiled broadly, remembering the journey that had brought them to this moment. Beside him sat Sarah Chen and Miguel Gonzalez, who had been flown to Chicago as special guests for the ceremony. As Marcus concluded his speech, Miguel leaned over to Sarah and whispered, "Do you think I could give a speech like that someday when I'm a teacher?" "Miguel," she whispered back with absolute certainty, "I know you could do anything you set your mind to. That's what excellent education makes possible for every child." The thunderous applause that followed was genuine and heartfelt. The audience wasn't just applauding Marcus Rivera, the actor or advocate. They were celebrating the power of collaboration, the importance of listening, and the transformative potential of education when adults put children's needs ahead of political considerations. After the ceremony, the 4 unlikely partners, Marcus, John, Sarah, and Miguel, stood together on the steps of the Chicago Convention Center, looking out at the bustling city skyline. "You know," Marcus said thoughtfully, "when I flew to Phoenix that first day, I thought I was going to make a point about education funding. I never imagined I was starting a movement that would change so many lives, including my own." The most powerful movements usually begin with someone willing to speak uncomfortable truths, Mitchell replied. You called me ignorant, and in a way, you were right to do it. Not because I didn't care about education, but because I wasn't effectively communicating how much I cared. Sarah looked at both men with deep pride and affection. What you both learned is what every effective teacher knows. That real change happens when you listen more than you speak, and when you focus on the people you're trying to help, rather than on being right or winning arguments. Miguel, now 12 years old and beginning to show the leadership qualities that would serve him well as either a teacher or an astronaut, offered his own profound observation. I think what happened is that you all remembered what school is really supposed to be about. It's not about buildings or money or test scores. It's about helping kids learn to think and dream and become whoever they want to be. The simple wisdom of the child stopped all three adults in their tracks. After all the legislation, press conferences, awards, and recognition, it was Miguel who had articulated the fundamental truth that had driven everything they had accomplished together. As they walked back toward their hotel, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. He was still a successful actor, still lived in California, still appeared in movies and television shows. But he was also something he had never expected to become, an education advocate whose work was making a measurable difference in the lives of children across the country. Sarah Chen's original letter was now framed in his office, a daily reminder of the power of authentic communication and the importance of listening to voices that might otherwise go unheard. Mitchell had been transformed as well. The former military officer and businessman had discovered that his skills in strategic planning and team building translated perfectly to education reform. He had become one of the most effective advocates for teachers and students in the U.S. Senate, working across party lines to address education challenges nationwide. But perhaps the most significant change was in the relationship between the two men who had started as public adversaries. They had learned that disagreement didn't require disrespect, that criticism could be a gift when it came from genuine concern, and that the most unlikely partnerships often produced the most meaningful and lasting results. As they said their goodbyes that evening, preparing to return to their respective homes and responsibilities, Marcus and Mitchell shook hands one final time. "Thank you," Marcus said simply. "For what?" "For proving that it's possible to be completely wrong about someone and still be absolutely right about what matters most." Mitchell smiled warmly. "Thank you for caring enough about children to risk being wrong about me." The story that had begun with harsh public criticism and political confrontation had evolved into something neither man could have predicted. A partnership that had changed not just education policy in Arizona, but had also demonstrated the transformative power of listening, learning, and working together for a cause greater than themselves. Sarah Chen's heartfelt letter had done more than bring two unlikely allies together. It had reminded everyone involved that behind every policy debate, every budget discussion, and every political disagreement, there were real children with real dreams waiting for adults to remember what truly mattered. And in classrooms across Arizona and beyond, children like Miguel Gonzalez continued to dream ambitious dreams, now supported by the knowledge that when adults listened to their voices and worked together on their behalf, extraordinary things could happen. The final word belonged to Miguel himself, who had written a new essay for his 7th grade class about what he had learned from watching the adults in his life work together. Sometimes grown-ups forget that they're all on the same team. When Mr. Marcus called Senator John ignorant, it wasn't mean. It was like when Ms. Chen corrects my homework. She's not being mean. She's helping me learn and improve. And when Senator John showed Mr. Marcus all his research, it wasn't showing off. It was like when I share my books with classmates who need them. I learned that the best solutions come when people stop trying to be right and start trying to help. And I learned that sometimes a letter from a teacher can change everything, because teachers know how to help people learn and grow and become better. When I become a teacher astronaut like I want to be, I'm going to remember that the most important lesson isn't about math or science or space exploration. It's about listening to each other and working together to help everyone succeed. That's what real education looks like, and that's what real leadership means. As Miguel finished writing his essay, he smiled with satisfaction, knowing that somewhere in Washington and Los Angeles, and classrooms across the country, the adults who had listened to his voice were continuing the important work they had started together. And in schools everywhere, teachers like Sarah Chen were opening new textbooks, welcoming manageable class sizes, and helping children discover that their dreams were not just possible, they were inevitable when the right support and resources were in place. The letter that had started it all remained framed in Marcus Rivera's office, a permanent testament to the power of authentic voices, the magic of unlikely partnerships, and the extraordinary things that happen when adults remember to put children's needs and dreams above all else. Epilogue. 5 years later. 5 years after that first confrontational press conference in Phoenix, the ripple effects of Marcus Rivera and Senator John Mitchell's unlikely partnership had spread far beyond Arizona's borders. The Miguel Gonzalez Foundation for Educational Excellence had become a national model, with chapters in 23 states and a track record of successful education reform that was studied by policymakers around the world. Marcus stood in his Los Angeles office, looking out at the Pacific Ocean stretching endlessly toward the horizon. The walls were lined with awards and recognitions, but the centerpiece remained Sarah Chen's original handwritten letter, now carefully preserved under museum-quality glass. Next to it hung a photograph from Miguel's high school graduation ceremony, where he had delivered the valedictorian speech about his dreams of becoming both a teacher and an astronaut. His phone buzzed with a text message from Miguel, now 17 and a freshman at Arizona State University on a full academic scholarship. Mr. Marcus, just declared my double major, education and aerospace engineering. Ms. Chen says you and Senator John would be proud. Thanks for believing in impossible dreams. Marcus smiled, remembering the 9-year-old boy who had written about wanting to make sure every child had enough books. That same passionate curiosity had driven Miguel to excel academically, while maintaining his commitment to helping other children achieve their educational goals. The foundation had established the Miguel Gonzalez Scholarship Program, providing full college funding for students from underfunded schools who demonstrated both academic excellence and a commitment to giving back to their communities. Miguel had been the first recipient, but he was now one of over 200 scholarship winners pursuing higher education across the country. Sarah Chen had become something of a legend in education circles. After serving as curriculum coordinator, she had earned her doctorate in education and was now the superintendent of the Tucson Unified School District. Under her leadership, the district had become a national model for innovative teaching methods and student achievement. She still maintained close relationships with her former students, including Miguel, and had been instrumental in developing the foundation's teacher mentorship programs. Senator Mitchell had been re-elected twice since their initial collaboration, each time with broader support from both educators and parents. His expertise in education policy had made him one of the most respected voices in Congress on the issue, and he had successfully guided similar legislation through passage in 12 other states. The Arizona model of bipartisan education reform had become a template for meaningful policy change, but beyond the professional accomplishments and policy victories, the most enduring change had been personal. Marcus and Mitchell had maintained their friendship through the years, speaking regularly and continuing to visit schools together across the country. Their partnership had demonstrated that authentic relationships could transcend political differences when people focused on shared values rather than ideological divisions. Marcus's career had evolved significantly as well. While he continued acting in select projects, he had become increasingly drawn to producing and funding educational content. His production company had created a series of documentaries highlighting innovative teachers and successful education programs, bringing national attention to educators who were making extraordinary differences in their communities. The success of their work had attracted international attention. Marcus and Mitchell had been invited to speak at education conferences in Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia, sharing the story of how a public confrontation had evolved into transformative collaboration. Their message resonated globally, that meaningful change happened when people listened to each other and focused on the needs of children rather than political positioning. 3 years earlier, they had established the International Alliance for Educational Excellence, connecting education advocates and policymakers from around the world. The organization had facilitated teacher exchange programs, shared best practices for education funding, and created a global network of schools committed to innovative teaching methods. Miguel had become the unofficial youth ambassador for the Alliance, speaking at international conferences about the student perspective on education reform. His presentations consistently emphasized the same themes that had emerged in his childhood essay, that students needed adults to listen to their voices, work together across differences, and remember that education was ultimately about helping children achieve their dreams. Sarah Chen had also gained international recognition, serving as an advisor to education ministers in several countries and helping to develop teacher training programs that emphasized both pedagogical excellence and emotional support for students. Her approach, which balanced academic rigor with genuine care for student well-being, had been adopted by school systems on 5 continents. The Foundation's work had expanded beyond funding and policy advocacy to include direct support for individual schools and teachers. They had created emergency grant programs for schools facing immediate crises, professional development opportunities for teachers in underserved communities, and technology initiatives that connected students in rural areas with educational resources and mentors. One of their most successful programs was the Letters Project, inspired by Sarah Chen's original letter. Students, teachers, and parents from across the country wrote letters describing their educational experiences, challenges, and dreams. These letters were shared with policymakers, community leaders, and other educators, creating a constant flow of authentic voices in education discussions. The project had collected over 50,000 letters, creating a powerful archive of American education experiences. Many of these letters had directly influenced policy decisions, while others had connected individual students with mentors and opportunities. The simple act of writing and sharing their stories had empowered countless individuals to become advocates for their own educational communities. Marcus often reflected on how dramatically his understanding of effective advocacy had evolved. In his early Hollywood career, he had believed that celebrity status and media attention were the most powerful tools for creating change. His experience with education reform had taught him that authentic relationships, careful listening, and sustained commitment were far more effective than publicity campaigns or political theater. Mitchell had undergone a similar transformation in his approach to public service. His military and business background had initially led him to focus on efficiency and results, sometimes at the expense of communication and relationship building. Working with Marcus and the education community had shown him the importance of storytelling, emotional connection, and transparent communication in effective governance. Their partnership had also influenced a new generation of political leaders and advocates. Young politicians from both parties studied their collaboration as a model for bipartisan problem-solving, while activists and celebrities looked to their relationship as an example of how to build effective coalitions across different constituencies. The Arizona Educational Excellence and Accountability Act had become a case study taught in public policy programs at universities across the country. Students analyzed how the legislation had been crafted, promoted, and implemented, learning lessons about stakeholder engagement, coalition building, and sustained advocacy that applied far beyond education policy. But perhaps the most meaningful impact had been on the thousands of individual students whose educational experiences had been transformed by the changes they had helped create. Improved funding had led to smaller class sizes, updated materials, better teacher retention, and enhanced support services. Standardized test scores had improved significantly, but more importantly, students reported higher levels of engagement, confidence, and educational satisfaction. Teachers across Arizona and other states with similar reforms reported feeling more supported, better compensated, and more effective in their work. Many educators who had been considering leaving the profession had chosen to stay, while others had been attracted to return to teaching because of the improved working conditions and recognition. The changes had created a positive cycle. Better resources and support led to improved teacher retention and effectiveness, which resulted in better student outcomes, which generated increased public support for education funding, which enabled further improvements and innovations. 5 years later, Miguel Gonzalez was thriving in his college studies, maintaining a perfect GPA while tutoring other students and working part-time at a local elementary school. His professors described him as one of the most intellectually curious and socially conscious students they had ever taught. His dream of becoming both a teacher and an astronaut no longer seemed impossible. NASA had recently announced a new program specifically designed to recruit educator astronauts who could teach about space exploration from orbit. Sarah Chen had been approached by several universities about joining their education faculties, but she had chosen to remain in Tucson, continuing her work with the district and the foundation. She believed deeply that sustainable change happened through long-term commitment to specific communities rather than moving between prestigious positions. Marcus had recently purchased a ranch outside Phoenix, spending several months each year in Arizona to stay connected to the communities and schools that had inspired his advocacy work. The ranch served as a retreat center for educators, hosting summer institutes and providing a quiet space for teachers to develop innovative curricula and teaching methods. Senator Mitchell was considering running for governor of Arizona in the next election cycle, with education reform as the centerpiece of his potential campaign. Polls showed him with strong support from both Republican and Democratic voters, a testament to his reputation for principled leadership and effective collaboration. The foundation had recently announced its most ambitious project yet, a national campaign to ensure that every public school in America had adequate funding, qualified teachers, and modern resources by 2030. The initiative would require unprecedented coordination between federal, state, and local governments, as well as support from private foundations, corporations, and individual donors. Marcus and Mitchell would co-chair the campaign, bringing together the coalition-building skills and authentic relationships they had developed over the past 5 years. They were confident that the model of collaboration they had pioneered in Arizona could be scaled nationally, creating systemic change that would benefit millions of students. The announcement of the national campaign had generated enormous media attention and political interest. Education advocates across the country had endorsed the initiative, while political leaders from both parties had praised the bipartisan approach and ambitious goals. But for Marcus, Mitchell, Sarah, and Miguel, The most important validation came from the students and teachers whose lives had already been transformed by their work. The letters, emails, and personal stories they received daily reminded them that behind every policy discussion and funding debate were real people with real dreams, waiting for adults to remember what truly mattered. As Marcus prepared to fly back to Arizona for the Foundation's annual conference, he paused to reread Sarah Chen's original letter one more time. The words that had once seemed like a simple plea from a struggling teacher now read like a prophecy of the changes that were possible when people chose to listen, learn, and work together. "Please don't let our children become just another political debate," she had written. "They deserve better than that." 5 years later, millions of children across the country were indeed receiving better schools, better teachers, better resources, and better opportunities to achieve their dreams. The letter that had started with one teacher's hope had become a movement that was transforming education across America. And in classrooms from Arizona to Maine, from Alaska to Florida, students like Miguel Gonzalez continued to dream big dreams, now supported by the knowledge that when adults put children's needs first and work together with purpose and persistence, truly extraordinary things could happen. The story that had begun with a public confrontation and a private letter had become something much larger, a testament to the power of authentic communication, unlikely partnerships, and the unwavering belief that every child deserved an excellent education, regardless of their circumstances or zip code. Marcus smiled as he closed the frame containing Sarah's letter. Tomorrow, he would be back in Arizona, visiting schools, meeting with teachers, and listening to students share their stories and dreams. The work was far from finished, but the foundation they had built together was strong enough to support the ambitious goals they had set for the future. Somewhere in Tucson, Miguel Gonzalez was studying for his physics midterm while preparing a presentation about Mars exploration for the elementary school students he tutored. Sarah Chen was reviewing applications for the next round of foundation scholarships, looking for students who combined academic excellence with a commitment to helping others. Senator Mitchell was drafting legislation that would extend the Arizona model to federal education policy. And across the country, in thousands of classrooms, students were learning that their dreams mattered, their voices were important, and their futures were limited only by their willingness to work hard and support each other. The letter that had changed everything remained exactly where it belonged, at the center of a movement that had proven that when people choose collaboration over confrontation, listening over lecturing, and hope over cynicism, they can create changes that last for generations. In the end, Sarah Chen had been absolutely right. When adults speak up for children with honesty and love, people will listen. And when enough people listen and act together, they can transform not just schools and policies, but the very definition of what's possible for every child in America.